Welcome to Familypreneur, the podcast for parent entrepreneurs
raising kidpreneurs.
It's time for your weekly dose of inspiration and actionable tips to build your business and find better balance, all while strengthening your family. And now we'd like to introduce your host.
She's my mom and thebomb.com, Meg Brunson.
Hey there, thanks for joining me on another episode of the Familypreneur podcast. Today's guest helps content creators grow their audience by maximizing their return on the content they create. She is the author of the best-selling book, Content 10X, More Content, Less Time, Maximum Results, the ultimate guide to reaching more people online with your content, and is also the host of the Content 10X podcast, where she teaches all that you need to know about repurposing your content. I'm excited to introduce you to the founder of Content 10X, Amy Woods. Hey, Amy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Yes. So I'm excited because today we're going to talk about content repurposing. And I think that this is super important because we are all so limited on time. You know, right now we're recording this in the middle of this global pandemic. And I kind of love that you're in a totally different place than I am. I'm in the US, you're in the UK. So before this interview, we had a little chat about how things are going in each of our respective countries. But I think now more than ever, content repurposing is so important, and especially for parent entrepreneurs. Can you tell me a little bit about what exactly content repurposing is?
Yeah, sure. And I think you're right in terms of it's really important at the moment, I think, for almost like the world's divided at the moment with countries in lockdown, where some people have no time whatsoever at the moment because, you know, suddenly kind of maybe kids are at home, they're running a business and they're not used to having the children around and all that kind of stuff, and they have no time. And then there's other people who have a lot of time actually because, you know, they maybe don't have a family, they're not able to go and do the usual social activities, and they're just stuck at home and they have a lot more time. And I think content repurposing, there's so much you can do in both sides. It really helps with maybe embarking on a bigger project, or also just being able to keep content going when you don't have as much time. But yeah, in terms of what it means, I think there's loads of different definitions that fly around about content repurposing. And my definition of it is all content is a form of communication. That's what we're trying to do, communicate with people. And when we repurpose our content, we are taking the message that we are trying to communicate and changing maybe the format. So we could be changing a video into a written format, into a blog post, into a podcast, into social media content. And we're changing the location. So we might be going from the content being on YouTube to being on our website, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And ultimately, what we are trying to do is get that message in front of a lot more people who consume content in different ways and in different places, so that we just have a bigger reach and we can impact and grow our audience and you know, be in front of more people for what we want to achieve with our content, whether it's for business, whether it's for hobby, whatever that is. If we want to reach more people, repurposing helps us to do that.
And it sounds time consuming. So how long does it typically take to repurpose one piece of content? Like, is that a time-consuming process?
The way I look at it is it's really important to see content repurposing as not this additional thing that you do, but actually part of the content creation process. So it really should play a part in what you do. Say you're a podcaster or say you're a video content creator, then I firmly believe that it shouldn't be segmented. It should, you know, the time should be time spent on content. So you only have a certain amount of time per week to spend on content. Let's say you have 10 hours or something like that. And in those 10 hours, you spend that producing, let's say somebody has two podcast episodes that goes live a week. They spend about 5 hours on one, 5 hours on the other. And that goes into the planning, preparation, the episode, some editing, and then getting that out on their website and podcast apps. But if you're not doing anything more than that, then it's really not doing the podcast episode the justice it deserves. So instead of then doing the second episode, I would challenge that for the other 5 hours to not get on the hamster wheel of the next episode, but spend that on the repurposing of that podcast episode and on getting it into more places. So you only have a certain amount of time, but it's what you do with that time, I think, and making sure that repurposing has a part to play. Now, like how much time you can really go to town with it. So, I run a content repurposing agency. So when people outsource to us their content repurposing, just to give you an example of a lot that you can do. So we'll have people who do, let's say, a Facebook Live, and then we will repurpose the Facebook Live into a YouTube video where we strip out live aspects and really just go for really core, valuable bits of the live, and we'll turn that into a YouTube video. We'll also extract the audio from the live and we'll turn that into a produced podcast episode. We'll take the sentiment and what was said and all the points made and things like that, and we'll turn that into a blog post, a long form, like SEO focused blog post for their website. We'll extract pull quotes and things like that and create images for all the social media platforms. And we'll take lots of short little bite-sized videos and we'll share them on Instagram and Insta stories and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and places like that. And we'll maybe even create things like a content upgrade. So a checklist or a swipe file or a PDF version of the top tips from that live, that kind of thing. So that's load, that's going from live on Facebook to all the podcasting apps, to YouTube, to all the social media channels, to growing your email subscribers. Usually you would send an email as well to email subscribers. So that's loads, but that is a team working on it. That's my team. That's a copywriter, graphic designer, video editor, podcast producer, all these people. If you don't, if you're not outsourcing, if you're doing it yourself, or you maybe have, a virtual assistant or somebody, a small team or somebody, a small budget to get some help in, then you just have to be wise as to, working out, well, what would be one small thing that I could do? So if I have a video, one thing I could always do is turn it into a blog post, and that blog post will help me get found by the search engines. And just do what you can in the time that you have. Or I really want to grow on Instagram and I'm doing a podcast every week. So I'll spend a couple of hours turning that podcast into audiogram sound bites to share on Instagram and quotes and conversation starters for Insta stories and things like that. And that's what I'll do. So you have to be realistic with your time, and you have to really not try and be everywhere, but know your audience, know where they hang out, and know where to focus your efforts. And I always say, look at ways to change up the medium. So if it was audio content, don't do more audio, do written, do video, because you're just going to connect with people who have different learning styles and different ways they like to consume content. But yeah, there's every spectrum from small little steps with what time you've got to the whole shebang.
I loved that explanation. I feel like as you were talking, it was a total combination of, oh, that seems so easy, to, wait a minute, that's a lot of platforms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm also wondering your opinion on, do you think that it's best to start with a video-based content because it gives you the most opportunities? Like if you're starting with just audio, you can't easily, not in a way that I think is as enjoyable to consume, turn audio into video. Like you can do audiograms and stuff, but it's not as exciting to watch. So do you recommend video?
Yeah, I do. I would say that whenever I get asked that question, what's the best starting point? Because I would always say to anyone who's creating content, choose one medium and try and be really good at that. Don't try and, be everything to YouTube and everything to your podcast and everything to a live show and things like that. Try and choose one and go all in and be really focused and be good at that. But so people say to me, well, in that case, what should it be? Should I do a podcast? Should I blog? Should I video? Now, I kind of have my answer to that in an ideal world. It's always video, because with video, you have audio. You can extract audios from videos, and you could then turn that into a podcast if it was appropriate, if it wasn't too visually dependent, things like that. And then, then with video, you can do the write-up and you create the blog post from the video. And like you said, audiograms are great, but video is always more engaging. So you can take, social media videos and share them. So the soundbite is actually a video instead. So I think the starting point is a video is great, and to take that a level up, live streams are brilliant, because you in a live stream, if you do a weekly one, same time, same place, and you grow a community, you have the community side of things, you have access to you, transparency, authenticity. You can segment the live so that you have this section where you present like as if it was a podcast, or you bring the guest on and you interview them live, that kind of thing. And then you take bits from the live for everything else. But then what I always say is, firstly, it has to be something that you're also comfortable with. So it's easy to say that, video is great, but not everybody's comfortable on video. And I don't think that you should just, try, if it's not for you and it just doesn't feel right, and you're not comfortable going on the camera, especially live. I mean, live is another level of confidence when it comes to video content. You'd be better finding the thing that you can be consistent with, and that you're going to enjoy, and not commit to video and then have heart palpitations every time you're about to do a video because you're nervous and you don't like it and that kind of thing. So in practice, if you're confident on video, or you want to learn to be confident on video, start with video. But if video is not for you, then podcasting is great, blogging is great. There's other forms that are great. Just consistency and quality is the most important thing, and then everything will be great after that. But if you can be consistent and do quality video, start with video.
And I know a lot of podcasters who also blog and vice versa. I feel like no matter if it's easier for you to talk content out, then the podcast is a great option. And if it's easier for you to write content out, then you could write a blog post. Yeah. And then I caution you to read it. If you're going to read it, you need to be able to act through it so it doesn't sound like you're reading it. But those are two options, and they seem to be fairly easy, I think, for me as a podcaster. So if you're doing one of those, the other would be easy.
Yeah, I agree, because for my podcast, most of my episodes are solo shows, and then I just occasionally bring a guest on. And quite often we used to always do the podcast first, and then we will turn the podcast episode into a blog post. But about, 2 months ago, I changed it. So I started to write the blog post first and do all that research and things like that, and then do the podcast episode. But as you said, I was really acutely aware that I didn't want the blog post in front of me, because I didn't want to read the blog post. So I would extract the key the key points and turn that into another kind of talking point document as opposed to the blog post. So to know to kind of just what the flow on, what the points I want to hit are, and any statistics I might have found or anything like that, but not completely read it. Your head's already ready in such a good space to do that episode, because you've put all that effort into the blog post, that it's so much easier to then reel off the podcast or the video or whatever is coming next. It's a lot easier. But yeah, you don't want to sound too scripted, do you really?
No, because it's not fun to listen to.
No.
Well, I'd love to know too. So let's talk a little bit about technology. Are there any tech tools or apps that you use through this content repurposing process that might be recommended for our listeners?
Yeah, so there's a few actually. If you are a podcaster and you have audio only, you record the audio. The tool that I recommend for creating the audiograms that I mentioned before is called Wave, WAVVE.co, is it? .com, Wave. Anyway, if you Googled Wave audiograms, you find them. We've used Wave since the start. I know there are other ones. There's Headliner as well, but we just love the features and have used Wave for a while, so I recommend them. And then for actually interesting, I should mention that I think it's really good to have a process flow that you follow for each blog post or podcast episode, video, whatever's your thing. I really recommend using Trello or similar like Asana and Basecamp. The project management tools that you can use. So Trello, it's a free plan, and you can set up your process flow of what you would do for each time you create the content. Because if you're going to commit to repurposing your content and being consistent with not just creating the original piece, but the things that you do after, I really think working with something like Trello, where you're tracking it and then you just duplicate and look the list from each episode and do the same list of activities for the next episode. So I'd really recommend that. Other tools. So when it comes to turning videos or podcasts into blog posts, it's sometimes a good idea to get a transcript first and then wordsmith the transcript into a written article or blog post, or use that to create really great show notes. And I recommend otter.ai for the transcripts. They were really great for, you had a really large amount of minutes free per month that you could use, but as we speak, I understand this week or last week, they've really pulled that back now. You only get like 30 minutes free now or something. But there's the otter.ai is good. There's Descript as well, which is quite similar, pulling off transcripts and sound bites. There's also rev.com. So we use rev.com for things like captions. So when we're burning captions onto videos and creating caption files, subtitles, rev.com is really good. And then when it comes to video editing and having videos and then extracting audio and things like that, to be honest, we still use video editing software really. So my team tend to use Final Cut Pro, or I use Filmora. Otherwise, I think Adobe Premiere, but that's what we tend to use. But there are other tools out there. There's a tool called Splashio, and you can use Splashio to create short social media videos. It's a bit pricey for how many you get per month, to be honest, though. And then actually a good friend of mine has a business, a tool called Repurpose.io. I really recommend people check that out, actually. It's an automated tool that will repurpose things like, let's say you've gone live on Facebook, it will automatically extract the audio from the Facebook Live, so that you could have an audio file for a podcast episode. It could automatically post the video into other places, and it can even automatically turn the video into a different like size and format, so that you can share it in other places, so Square for Instagram and Portrait for stories and things like that. So repurpose.io is another one. I think they're kind of like the main tools that we use. And Canva, really big fan of Canva. You don't have to be a professional graphic designer to create some great images and video templates and things like that. canva.com, Canva. We'll love it. Absolutely love Canva. So that's another one that I would recommend.
And Canva has I think it's just a beta right now, but you can make like GIFs and stuff like that. And so I feel like that's a great, if you're like not comfortable with video, but you want to add a little, pizzazz to your graphics, those GIFs, those animated, even just like some animated arrows or something, just draw the eye in the news feeds. So I love that. And thank you so much for all of those tools. I think it's good to know that there are tools out there that can help make this process easier. So I will go through and list all of the things that we talked about, make sure we get the .cos and .coms and all those different websites correct, so that people can go and start to research what might be the best options for them.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd love to kind of switch gears a little bit. Can you tell me a little bit about your story and your background and how you got to the point where you are today? And I know you mentioned your team, so you've clearly grown this business to more than just you. Can we hear a little bit about that story?
Yeah, of course. So my background, I guess like trying to do a long story short, but when I graduated from business school many years ago now, I travelled for a while, for a couple of years. Well, worked to save the money to go travelling, then travel for a year or so, and then settled down to my career, which ended up with being a management consultant. So I was just in a big, global management consultancy firm for 13 years. So it was supposed to be a 1 to 2 year plan. I was going to learn everything about business and then set up my own business. But 1 to 2 years became 13 years. And I don't, it wasn't a bad thing. I guess it was because I was, enjoying the career, and it was working with big, Fortune 500 companies, mainly the big banks, from Bank of America to Barclays and big banks around the world, and also other organizations, big organizations like Microsoft. And totally different to what I was doing now. So I was working in mergers and acquisitions and big business transformation programs. But then two things really happened. I'd always been keen on starting a business. But as I said, I always thought I needed to come up with a big invention. I was always watching things like Dragon's Den and I think you have Shark Tank in the US version, but I was always watching things like that, thinking, I've got to invent something, and until that time I would carry on working. But then, so I just carried on. But then so two things happened. One thing was having children. So the career that I'd had was very heavy work hours and a lot of travel. It was very normal to be expected to just fly somewhere on Monday very early and arrive home on Friday very late, and that would be the lifestyle. So you can't obviously do that when you've got kids. And also I became poorly, actually. That was the other thing. So I'd been very healthy for my whole life, but I became ill after I had my second child, and I just had to have a lot of operations and a lot of time off work and recovering from all the operations. So there was a year where I was quite poorly, and in that time it took me off the hamster wheel. I was always on the corporate wheel, and then I had to come off it. And that was when I invested in learning a lot about business. So I started just taking online courses, podcast after podcast, reading blog posts, consuming content, and just learning and learning and learning. So that basically, I guess, took me off the hamster wheel, because I started my business during that time. I started a business, an online business, but not Content 10X. But the online business that I was doing, I was creating a lot of content. Because I guess I've come from that management consultant background of being process driven and everything, I immediately wanted to have really efficient processes behind the content. So that's when I started doing a lot of the repurposing. And then that's when I realized there was a business opportunity that working with different freelancers like copywriter, graphic designer, and video editor and things like that to repurpose what I did every week. I just realized that I really enjoyed that. It was something that other people would want to outsource as well, but not juggle all these different freelancers, just have a business that does it for them. So yeah, I guess I just took the leap then, and completely left Accenture and started Content 10X, which was nearly 3 years ago. So it was just me to start with, actually. So for a couple of months, it was just me, and then I hired my first person and had a few ups and downs with different people before finding more longer term employees. So one of the longest standing employees worked for me for 2.5 years. And I just grew the team. So every time, we got more clients and started to have to grow the team to meet the client demand and things like that. And we're still a small agency. We're not huge. But we, serve clients from all over the world now, podcasters, mainly the US, actually, because content creators generally more progressive over in the US. So probably 80% of our clients are based in the States. Podcasters, video creators, live streamers, and speakers as well. So we repurpose talks for speakers too. And yeah, I kind of still I've got the podcast that's been going for a couple of years now. I published a book last year, and we've now got a toolkit. So if we don't do it for people, people can buy our toolkit and learn how to do it through the toolkit. So we have tutorials and checklists and things like that people can use, which is kind of giving away what we do for our clients, but we'll show you how to do it. So there's either the book or the toolkit, or we'll do it for you. And yeah, that kind of takes me right to today.
There is a lot there. So where can people find the book and the podcast?
Yeah, so it's actually just all at content10x.com, which is content10x.com. /podcast for the podcast, /book for the book, /toolkit for the toolkit. So everything's at Content 10x, yeah.
Well, that makes it easier. We'll list all of those resources as well. I'd like to just ask you a question about your book. Is your book results of content repurposing?
It is, in a way, yeah. So the book, I started writing the book, and then it ended up taking around about a year or so. What happened was I'd been doing the blog and the podcast for over a year, and then I decided I had loads of content that could go into a book. So I worked out what I wanted to go in the book, and I worked out where I'd already created content that there's nothing that's a direct kind of copy and paste or anything, because everything ended up being kind of built on further, but there was foundations all over the place that I could build up from. And then interestingly, if there was something I wanted in the book that I hadn't done a podcast episode or blog post on, that kind of fed my future plans then, because as I was writing the book, I was creating new content that could then go in the book as well. So the whole book really is a combination of repurposing what I had and then creating new content with the intention of it being a podcast, a blog post, and going into the book as well. And yeah, we have the books in Kindle and paperback, and also audio book as well. And it just kind of, I guess, goes a lot deeper to the content in the podcast and the book, and takes people on more of a, I guess, like a roadmap than the blogs and the podcast, obviously, like a bit all over the place. One week it might be on one thing, one week it might be on another, but the book I tried to keep everything very nicely categorized to make things easier for people. But yeah, kind of like a big repurposing exercise, I guess.
And I appreciate how you broke that down too. I think a book, for a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm one of them, I've written a children's book, but not what I call a big girl book. So a book is something on my horizon, and I know it's on the horizon for a lot of people. So I appreciate you breaking down how you made that work. You know, it's not just taking your blog posts, it's not a collection of blog posts, but you could use a lot of those foundations to build.
Yeah, it's always, exactly. It's always easier to build on anything with something to start with, isn't it, than a complete blank canvas. So if I'd done a blog post on anything, it then helped me start that chapter where I could, write more and write in more of the format of a book than in the format of a blog post, slightly different style and tone. But yeah, it's always easier to start on a foundation than start from scratch with just a big blank canvas. So like for yourself, and if you're listening, thinking about, wow, I have mountains of content I could easily turn into a book, I just really recommend work out what you want to go in the book. Don't let the content that you've created dictate the book. Work out what you want to go in the book. Have your sections and your chapters written out, and then look at your content and work out for every single chapter, what do you already have, and make a note of it. So in this chapter, I could actually base this on blog posts 10, 20 and 50 or whatever. Work it all out, spot all of your gaps, bring everything together and just start fleshing it out from there. And you'd be surprised how you can get on quite of a run when you do that as well, and you feel quite positive and inspired that you have it all there. It's just about turning it into the book.
And then before we go, the last question I'm going to ask you is how do you define balance in your household? So how old are your kids now?
6 and 8.
And you're running your business. So what does balance look like to you, or how do you redefine that?
Yeah, it's really challenging, isn't it? I guess I'm lucky that the kids, the boys are at school age. But I guess defining balance is just, it's hard to achieve balance, isn't it? I think there's always something that um, is, you can't have the constant balance, because there's some weeks and months where the family and one or both children or whoever need more of your time because of something, and there's other times where the business does just need more time. And so I guess defining balance is really just constantly making sure that everyone is okay, and that you kind of, when you see the tough times come in for, say, the business, you make, the necessary plans to still make sure that you're seeing enough and doing enough and there for the family. And when you see big things coming up with the family, like a big wonderful family holiday coming up or something, just making sure that you put the plans in place to take the foot off the pedal on the business a bit. So I guess with defining balance, I'm always very comfortable with the fact that it's always up and down, but as long as I'm accepting of that, and that everyone's communicated with, and we're all happy and we all understand what needs attention and when and things like that. But they, with the kids, they get that I run a business. I don't think they ever feel that they don't see enough. Well, kids always feel they don't see, even if you were with them 24/7 staring at them, they'd probably still find a way of saying that they want more of you sometimes, wouldn't they? But no, I think just temperature checks, everyone's happy, and also just getting perspective, and having a bit of a talking to yourself sometimes if you feel like you're losing perspective of what is important. And family is always the most important thing. The business is important, but it's never more important than family. So always making sure that they know that and that they come first.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much for joining me today and taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing so much information about content repurposing and the tech pieces and writing a book. It has been a very valuable episode.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
That's it for today's episode of the Familypreneur Podcast. You'll find all the links mentioned in this week's episode and the show notes at megbrunson.com/podcast. Until next week, I'll see you over in the Familypreneur community. Bye for now.
Do us a favor. Share this podcast to a friend. It's like my mom always says, sharing is caring.